to do in our final segment on the program that is where politics and economics collide is delve a little bit into the nature of economics, what drives an economy, what really makes it tick. Is it the consumer or is it investment? And then also some of the policies that are going on, the role Peter Navarro is playing in the White House, trade, and more. Let's talk about it with somebody who always gives a no-holds-barred perspective. He is editor at RealClearMarkets as well as vice president at FreedomWorks and the author of a number of books, including, most recently, They're Both Wrong, a policy guide for America's frustrated independent thinkers. John Tamny rejoins us on Jimmy at the Crossroads. John, my friend, welcome back.
Hey, Jimmy, thanks for having me.
So how are you and your family doing so far amidst all this since we last spoke a couple weeks ago?
Oh, there's frustration in being at home a lot, but how dare I complain? And I mean that sincerely when you think about what some people are going through, where they quite literally woke up one day and were told they couldn't come to work, that people literally have had their businesses taken from them, people just out of nowhere laid off. How dare I complain? And so I'm just doing the best I can. I'm writing every day, writing more than I ever have. As long as I continue to have a job, I'll work harder than ever.
I think that's so well put, that there are so many people who, unlike us, are not able to continue working. In fact, there's one analysis, I think it was Moody Analytics. I wasn't sure yesterday, but I think it was Moody's Analytics saying 29% of the American economy is shut down now because of government edicts. And yet, what I find so interesting are those who say how long this must last. We played a clip earlier, and I won't play the video, but Zeke Emanuel, who's a medical contributor at MSNBC and a senior fellow at the left-wing Center for American Progress, says Americans need to be prepared for 18 months more of this shutdown. And as I've been pointing out, only somebody who truly believes in and has faith in the government's ability to provide for the people and thinks it's the role of government to provide for the people can say such a thing. It's not just about the data and the science, but there's a political philosophy behind it and an economic philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, to respond to that is to give credence or respect to something that's just so absurd.
Well, I did it earlier, so don't blame me.
Yeah, no, I know. The idea that we could be shut down for that length of time, that you can do that without causing massive societal unrest that would lead to exponentially more deaths than any virus could ever bring on. It's interesting. What do they always say? People talk their book. And so Zeke Emanuel is a doctor. And so I think in a sixth sense, some from that field live for the kinds of things. It's their form of ambulance chasing. When something like this comes up, their profile rises. And so they want us to be in crisis forever because they'll be in the public eye forever. What a sick thing to say.
Yeah, I don't see how you can just say, oh, well, the government will provide for 18 months so Americans can stay at home and be apart from their families and their friends, let alone from work. Now, I understand that there are remedial steps that they're trying to take, mitigation, some of which I agree with, some of which I don't. We need to address it. But even if you believe we should go a couple more months with this, the idea that you should go 18 months, I don't know how you can think that.
Well, and it's got to be stressed. There's no such thing as government spending. I mean, let's be honest. There is political allocation of resources that were always first created in the private sector. If government spent, well, then it would be certainly true that Haiti would have high levels of government spending. No, governments can only spend insofar as the private sector creates the wealth first. And so that's very important to stress. Even the federal government of the U.S., backed by the most productive people on earth, couldn't last that long. Would ultimately not have the funds. What's that saying? Eventually, with socialism, you run out of other people's money. Eventually, they'd run out of money. We need to be free to get back to work.
Now let's talk about the nature of an economy. So I've been watching different programs on YouTube and elsewhere where you hear people say, well, what you really need to do is provide money into people's pockets so that they can go out and spend it, I guess, part of it. I mean, right now I understand providing some relief for those who are out of work because of government dictates. But the idea goes beyond that. It's that consumers will need to be provided money from the government for a while because the consumer is the basis for the American economy. This is something, John Tamny, that you and I have discussed many a time in many conversations on the radio and now here at Jimmy at the Crossroads. That there's a fundamental fallacy there, but most people say this is a consumer economy. Is that a fallacy? If so, why?
It's an utter fallacy. Consumption is a consequence of economic growth, always. If everyone's got endless consumptive needs, but they're only able to fulfill them insofar as they produce first. And so Americans are big consumers because they're big producers. If all we did was consume, we'd still live in caves. It's the savings that lead to the creation of computers and cars and tractors that make us exponentially more productive. It's the savings that turn dial-up internet into what they say will be amazing 5G and eventually 10G internet that's going to transform how we do things and create forms of work that we never imagined. It's always the savings and investment that power production that then leads to consumption. To look at consumption is to miss the point. We all, again, want to consume, but we need to produce first.
Now, the Trump administration, it appears, John Tamny, is floating the idea of reducing the capital gains tax, which I see some people are saying, well, no, you shouldn't do that. If you're going to do anything, you need to reduce individual tax rates or give them money or what have you. Don't cut the capital gains tax rate. But going to your point about the way in which investment plays such a critical role, the fundamental role in our economy, if we want to, especially getting out of this economic malaise, once we do allow the economy to reopen, when the government says, sure, go ahead and start doing your businesses again, you are going to need capital investment to drive all of this. You and I are both advocates of eliminating the capital gains tax, but talk to us about why that is a worthwhile conversation to have, reducing or eliminating the capital gains tax, as opposed to a potential alternative, which is let's just focus on, say, cutting the income taxes of middle class or lower income workers, even though I would favor reducing tax rates on everybody.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, most taxation would be local in cities and states, since people could kind of choose their bliss. But of course, the capital gains rate should be zero. Why on earth would you penalize people for saving and investing when it's remembered that saving and investing are the drivers of all job creation, company creation, progress, productivity, all those things? My only frustration with this right now is, wait, policy to me is a non sequitur. We don't have a capital gains tax rate problem right now. What we have as a problem is that the political class in all levels has imposed command and control on the economy. And so until you fix the first part, where you say it's no longer right and we are not going to allow politicians to limit our ability to work and produce, all the other stuff kind of misses the point. And to me, it's just a bunch of happy talk. Get to the point. People are not free to work and produce right now. Everything else is irrelevant.
John Tamny, though, and again, he's vice president at FreedomWorks and also editor at RealClearMarkets. When we look at the criticism of reducing the capital gains tax, though, and you're absolutely right for the short term, the immediate sphere, the problem is for the economy is that the government's saying you can't function. But once we get out of this, or even before this point, we were hearing people say, well, we shouldn't cut the capital gains tax rate because that means that billionaires will be able to benefit. Well, first of all, billionaires are the ones that make capital work, that enable the economies to function by providing investment to businesses. But also, Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter, saying he's giving $1 billion, almost a third of his wealth, to help efforts to provide relief for coronavirus. Bill Gates also putting money to work. You have these billionaires that are trying to do things in a humanitarian way as well as business investment. What does that tell you?
Well, a couple things. In my instance, if I could control things, I would have them reinvest all that wealth. That's the most effective way to do it. But you hit on something important. When people say, oh, yeah, capital gains tax cut would help the billionaires, the response should always be, yeah, of course. And what's your point? because that's what you ideally want to have happen. Simple truth is that $1 in Jeff Bezos's pocket is exponentially more valuable to economic progress and job and company creation than $1 in my pocket. If you put an extra dollar in my pocket, I've got bills to pay. I've got things that I need. The beauty of someone like Bezos is that he's so rich he can't possibly spend all of his wealth. So every extra dollar not taken from him, almost as a rule, is going to be invested. And investment, of course, is again the driver of economic progress. It's the driver of job and growth and all the things that we want. And so always, if you really want growth, the only growth is in reducing the tax burden on those with the most.
One thing I've been struck by, and you mentioned command and control before, John Tamny, is the Defense Production Act and the implementation of that. I mean, here we have the government literally micromanaging supply chains. I can't fathom that.
It's amazing, and it shows you how much the conversation has drifted even in our time. You and I think I can speak for the both of us, have never really drifted away from the importance of free markets and all these things, but people just accept the idea that a president should arrogate to himself wartime powers to command industry to produce the things that he wants. And I'm like, well, wait a second. I've got a supercomputer in my pocket that years ago would have cost millions of dollars. I've got a flat screen 4H 8K UK TV, whatever that is, that a couple of years ago would have cost 25,000 plus. Capitalism turns scarcity into abundance all the time. If there's a problem of not enough ventilators, you don't then need the government to involve itself. It seems like the government's a non sequitur. It's just a needless interloper. Let price signals work, and we'll soon enough have ventilators as they're needed.
Speaking of ventilators and also the freedom to engage in commerce, General Motors has been ordered to produce ventilators. And they sent a letter on Friday to the Trump administration saying, hey, we have an issue here, which is that we can't produce the ventilators at an affordable price because, guess what? There are tariffs on the component parts. Now, the Trump administration was arguing, Peter Navarro in particular, who you wrote an article talking about in RealClearMarkets, John Tamny, the Trump administration via Peter Navarro has said, well, wait a second, we don't have tariffs on ventilators. You can just go ahead and do it. Just bring them in. But they were saying, no, the component parts of the ventilators have tariffs. That's the government raising the price of a needed item.
Well, it's just a reminder that the only closed economy is the world economy. Anything that is produced in the United States or by U.S. companies is a consequence of global production. My favorite example along these lines is they talk about American cars. Well, so the most American car, most of them are in fact Japanese made, or the most American made cars. But anyway, the most American car is the Jeep Cherokee. Well, okay, but 30% of the inputs that go into making the Jeep Cherokee come from around the world. So once you put taxes on foreign goods, you're just raising the price of production here. Everything is a consequence of supply chains and producers and creative people around the world. You cannot slap a tariff on the Chinese without it hitting Americans just as hard.
And you would think that in the midst of a crisis, they would understand, hey, the component parts to these products we need and would be best to manufacture here in the United States shouldn't be taxed. But then again, there are a heck of a lot of things that still have tariffs on them coming in from China, put in place by the Trump administration that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, you'd think that they would have known this in advance, that, wow, you put tariffs on something in China, you're going to harm every single American. There's just no way that you can do this without spreading great harm. As I always point out, if you're a worker, you're an importer. Now, that could be from goods across the street, but it's almost invariably goods from around the world. And so when you put tariffs up, you're taxing work in the United States. You're taxing the reason that we work. We work in order to get things. Tariffs raise the cost of us getting things.
Let's play Cut 5. Speaking of China and trade, this is President Donald Trump yesterday talking, or last night, on Sean Hannity's show about what's happening in terms of China and trade in his view.
So we just signed a great trade deal with China. They're supposed to be spending close to $250 billion. We never had a trade deal where they ripped us left and right for years and years and decades. And you have the World Trade Organization, you have World Health, and you have the World Trade. The World Trade Organization was a horror for us because China got in, and from the day they got in, they took advantage of world trade, and especially with the United States. And we never had a president that did anything about it, or an administration or anybody. We had no trade deal. You know, a lot of people think we had a bad deal with China. We had no deal with China. They just did whatever they wanted. You know, what I've done is we have a very strong deal. They're supposed to buy $250 billion with a B dollars worth of our product. That's phase one. Phase two will come. We're getting tariffs 25% on $250 billion. We never had anything from China. Look, China's done a great job, but we've rebuilt China because we gave them so much money for so many decades. We poured money into China, and it's absolutely ridiculous what we did and that was world trade.
So that's President Trump last night, and I was just struck by how he's always focused on the amount of product that is being purchased from the United States by China, or supposed to be. And then also the benefits that come from the fact that we get tariff money going into the federal coffers from products that come into the United States from China. I'm sure you have a lot to say about that.
Oh, yeah, I miss Republicans. I like the Republicans who used to talk about why politicians shouldn't plan economic exchange at all, but those days are sadly gone. The first thing, anything that raises federal revenues is a bad thing. Politicians don't just look lovingly at the money, they devise new ways to spend it, and that spending grows and grows. So basically, you're giving Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy, Chuck Schumer, the Kentucky Mitch McConnell, you're giving them more power over the economy. But beyond that, it's got to be stressed that the Chinese haven't taken advantage of us on trade. They've just given us a raise every day. Every day they get up and go to work, Americans get a raise. Their dollars buy more and more. And that's got to be stressed, that the Chinese aren't producing abundantly for the American market because they want to live impoverished lives. They're doing so because they want American goods, and they want them desperately. And so you see that there are 4,200 Starbucks in China on the way to 7,000. You see that China is the second largest market for Nike, the second largest market for McDonald's. It's the second biggest box office for U.S. movie makers. It's the fifth largest market in the world. Or no, it's China. Apple sells 1/5 of its iPhones there. Boeing 1/4 of its planes. GM sells more cars in China than it does in North America. They haven't taken advantage of us. They've grown, and in growing, they've become a huge market for American companies.
John Tamny, final question. This is going to be a broad one. You wrote a piece for RealClearMarkets, where you're an editor, published yesterday, entitled "Layoffs Are Always Sad." Peter Navarro's would be an exception. Of course, he is the lead China hawk in the Trump administration, has really helped shape China's trade, or the China trade policy in the administration, and also is now one of the leaders of implementing the Defense Production Act. What's your beef with good old Professor Navarro?
Oh, I almost regret that piece, to be honest with you. And I mean this very honestly. Hitting at Peter Navarro is shooting fish in a barrel. It's so easy. Navarro wants he wants the government to basically control the creation of ventilators. He wants a national plan for that. Well, you and I know that if there's a need expressed in the marketplace, that capitalism will provide it one way or the other. Navarro also says that looking forward after this, we've got to reduce our reliance on China's supply chains, that we've got to make more things here, buy American, manufacture American. Oh dear. What a call for the U.S. to move backwards. Let's never forget that the factory jobs are in China, and actually moving rapidly out of China precisely because they pay so little. And so if in fact they were able to bring factory jobs back to the United States, no one would want them. And of course, if you could mandate higher wages for them, well, U.S. production wouldn't be very competitive, and certainly it'd be even less competitive if we couldn't rely on global cooperation to make all the things that we make. And so, Navarro's talking nonsense. If he ever got his way, which he thank goodness won't, the U.S. would be impoverished. But I really and truly almost feel guilty. That was too easy. I think our side needs to be more innovative about the things they write about, and to come after someone as miniature in thought as Peter Navarro. I'm embarrassed. I'm sorry I did that.
Well, at the same time, he's in a senior position in the White House, John. So sometimes, even if you might feel the way you do, you need to present a countervailing position on Peter Navarro, because let's be honest that the folks on the left will criticize Navarro, but for very different reasons from the limited government standpoint that you and I come from.
That's it. No, you're very right, and I think there are bigger things right now, and I that's one of the columns I'd like to have back. I think the focus from our side should be all day, every day. Not that I'm the quarterback or I'm the dictator. We have a political class, Republican and Democrat at all levels, who have quite literally responded to a virus by saying we need to put tens of millions out of work and decree mass poverty to fight it. Can you believe this? Have we lost our minds? We have such bigger problems than some dopey administration figure talking about Buy American. Politicians at all levels are trying to limit our ability to work and produce. That's terrifying, and it has implications for the future. And I wish I hadn't wasted a day or anyone's time writing about someone so inconsequential.
Sure. John Tamny, never holding back a thought, editor, Real Clear Markets, vice president at FreedomWorks. Always a pleasure to talk with you, my friend. Be well to you and your family, and stay healthy.
Thanks, Jimmy. Have a great day. Great show.
Thank you. You as well. Again, John Tamny joining us from FreedomWorks, also Real Clear Markets. Always just enjoy conversation with John Tamny, because he never minces words. He'll always tell it exactly as he thinks, and he is very much a limited government guy, to be sure. And by the way,